If you want to get a chair or a mat in the back there, you can. Yeah. Welcome, everyone. Again, some of us have been sitting for the last hour, just so everyone in the room knows we're live, so you can be heard. And apparently this time it's true. So there's some audio and some video there. Right now we're at Yoga Samadhi. And so this is the second time we're doing an event here now, and over about a year and 4 months, I think, since the pandemic hit. It's really nice to be in this space. So we'll start with just a half an hour of meditation, and I'll give a short intro, offer a short guide to begin with. And then after that, I'll ring the bell and I'll have a short reflection and then question and answer. We're listening to sound right now. How you're experiencing sound. Is it possible to notice the space through that experience? As a sound contacts the ear, awareness holds that. And then another sound. We might be aware of trying to identify that sound, a particular sound that we're hearing. So we're aware, but we're not trying to do anything with our awareness. We're not trying to do anything with the sound, with making it into something. Identifying. So you might hear my voice and think it's not loud enough, or it's too loud. Or perhaps it's just right. But with awareness, we're just experiencing sound. And we're also experiencing how our body reacts to that sound. Is there any tension? Being aware of sound allows us to be aware of the space around us. So we're trying to maintain a quiet within, and just knowing sound as sound. We can be aware of how our senses are picking up on our external experiences. And at the same time, we're aware of our experience of having a body. You can feel the temperature of the room, how that affects us. The posture we're sitting in. So we're looking for a home base with our awareness. So this is a sense of presence with our experience without trying to make it into anything. Without needing to be anything or to get anything out of what we're watching. So we're okay just being the observer. Knowing what we're feeling. Is there awareness of the present moment? Is there perhaps a narrative? Or possibly there's awareness, but there's a sense of a doer there. Me being aware. If you have a sense of that doer, how does that feel in the body? Where is the one who is watching? If you'd like to stretch your legs for a moment, please go ahead. So last week, when we were here, I gave a talk, and it had a bit to do with the frustration of trying to deal with technology that wasn't working. And I could see now that there was a sense of anxiety still around that possibility that there's going to be another catastrophe. Everything's going to go wrong. So we tested it a couple of times and it seems to be working. And now I'm noticing a very anticlimactic feeling, as if, there's nothing to worry about, that's too bad. So it can be like that. There can be a sort of a wanting some interesting experience or some excitement or so it's really like, if either I want a particular situation to go a certain way, and then if it goes that way, then there's still dissatisfaction. It's not, doesn't always lead to happiness when we get what we want. In fact, usually when we get what we want, we kind of think, well, what's the next thing I can get? What can I find? What's the next experience? And then when we become good Buddhists, we can think, I'm just a sham, it's so shameful to get what I want and then want something else. But it's just so normal. This is just part of our everyday experience. We want things, and when we get them, we see they're not satisfying, but then we get fooled, thinking, well, the next thing will be satisfying, and the next thing after that, and what's amazing is just how often that continues to go, in that direction. And so that's, one of the things that we're trying to generate in our experience, in our awareness, is a sense of contentment, which is a satisfaction with just things being whatever way they are, just being okay. And ultimately, that's what equanimity is. So whatever is happening, we're not perturbed, or if we are perturbed, we're okay with being perturbed. We're taking our reactions as an impersonal phenomenon. We're not chastising ourselves for being crazy after all these years, sort of a way of thinking like, oh yeah, there I go again. And then there's just a feeling that's all right. And I think where that comes from is a sense of friendship. It comes from a sense of being friends with ourselves. And it's not an easy thing for many of us to feel that way. There's a very short poem that a Thai monk wrote, and I can't remember the first line. The first line is just not so important. It's something like, the sky is blue and the sun is out, and every day I am a friend to myself. And so it's really, I think, what that means to me is a sense of acceptance, that we are accepting of ourselves. When we feel angry or hurt or depressed, or we feel happy or elated, excited about something or let down, there's a sense of, oh, it's okay, it's all right. A comfort that we have, knowing that we don't have to chastise ourselves. And where that comes from, I think, is seeing the danger in it, the danger in that self-criticism that we carry around. And then recognizing, oh yeah, this is not helpful, this is not something that I find is useful for me. In fact, it's detrimental, it's painful, and it's not leading me in a positive direction. And so I think developing contentment has to do with a sense of being accepting of our experience and being friendly with our experience. And for many, that can be a hard habit to develop because it's easy to find fault, and it's easy to criticize, and it takes more energy to accept things as they are. It takes some effort to build a skill set around that, or a habit around that. And so many of us are familiar with the phrases, we're our own worst enemies. And it's, for most of us, it's a very private world that we carry around in terms of that. And surely not everyone suffers in this way, but it's very common for people to feel self-critical or doubting of themselves or frustrated. Why do I keep making the same mistakes? And then you might say, well, because I'm human. And then we might think, well, I don't want to be human. I want to be perfect. And as one of the things I was talking about last week, and I've talked about before, is this inability to make mistakes or want to make mistakes, or our sense that we shouldn't be able to fail or have problems in our lives that we're causing. We think I shouldn't have done that, or that was really stupid of me. And we can see this often when we're meditating, when we're very quiet with ourselves and we're seeing, oh man, I've just been thinking for like an hour straight. What is wrong with me? I mean, I've been doing this for years. And so I think it's very important to try to pay attention, rather than thinking of another project that we want to do for ourselves in terms of, I'm going to make myself a friend to myself project. It's more a sense of like, how can we be aware of what it is we're experiencing when we see that we've entered sort of the chastising zone, or the unfriendly zone. I was thinking about this the other day around, there were two servicemen who came over to the monastery to set up our Wi-Fi, because we had, most of you I think know that a bear climbed up our telephone pole and ripped down our internet cable right at the same time that the internet wasn't working here last week, so it was kind of ironic. We came back, and I had the bear idea in the back of my mind, but I didn't check out the telephone pole right away. But anyway, the servicemen came a few days later. They kept coming in and out over those 3 days, and I was getting more frustrated and watching that frustration. And it was very interesting to see that the two of them who came, one of them, the first one who arrived, was very friendly, and he immediately just had this sense of interest and just flexibility, and his, it was a very easy conversation to have. And then the next technician that came, he was on his phone, wasn't really acknowledging me, and I tried to kind of make some sort of introduction because his friend was off by the telephone pole, but he was just sort of on his phone, and I immediately came up with the sense, oh, that's interesting to see, like, what is friendliness? You know, how does that work? And how, you know, how we can see that maybe in ourselves, like how open we are to our own experiences, or how closed we are, and how we kind of turn ourselves off to something, or when we're chastising ourselves, it's almost a sense of wanting to shut down and not acknowledge, you know, what it is that we're experiencing. And in that, what was interesting is that afterwards, after they had taken care of what they were doing, and they successfully fixed the cable, then both of them came back, and I started to talk to them about just a question I had about live streaming and how that worked when there was no internet available. And the one who I found wasn't friendly actually started to be really friendly, and he started to be quite talkative. And then I got to see in myself, like, oh, I was making an assumption here. You know, I was kind of creating him as a person, like this is an unfriendly person, and this other one is friendly. And I could see that, you know, that sort of error, but also that rigidity in my own mind around, you know, how I was trying to define a particular person. And I think that we can often do that with ourselves. You know, we kind of berate ourselves, or and in that sense of what we're doing, we're creating who and what we think we are, and we're kind of stabilizing it. And that's what we're doing a lot of the times with our thoughts. So we're saying, I'm always the person who does that, or I'm always the person who does this. I'm usually a much more organized person. I'm never late. I should stop being late. I'm always such a procrastinator, whatever it is. And we keep saying these things over and over to ourselves and reinforcing that sense of what I am. And that's why I think these habits, when we're trying to be aware or we're trying to be content, they can be so strong that it's very hard to resist them. It's very hard to let go of them because we're attached with who and what we are. We're attached to how we identify with ourselves, and we have a sense of knowing this is what I am, this is how I am, this is how I can be. And there can be a discomfort sometimes if, for example, we see somebody else behaving differently, especially a partner, somebody in our close family, and we can do the same thing with them. We try to create them back into what they are. And unfortunately, this can occur if somebody's trying to improve their life. It can feel a little uncomfortable. Well, who's this person? I don't know who they are. They're acting quite differently. And ironically, even though that can be something quite good, there can be some behaviors, there can also be a feeling of discomfort around that because it's destabilizing. We don't know who another person is. And so I think for ourselves, even with meditation can have that experience where we're not really sure where I am anymore in the meditation. So it's sort of a sense of when you are following your own experience and you're aware, and there is a sense of peace or quiet within the mind, then all of a sudden this person comes out, and then we react to that person in ways that are very habitual, you know. So at the same time that we're witnessing like a voice or a thought, we're also identifying with it at the same time, and then we're creating ourselves around that. This is my thought. I shouldn't think this way, or I shouldn't do that, or I should do that. So I think it's important to be very careful with that sense of how we're experiencing ourselves, but also try to ask ourselves how we can create a friendly situation, how we can try to be friends with ourselves, how we can try to create contentment just being okay with our crazy notions and trying to take them in a less personal way. And so that takes a skill, that takes an understanding, and it also takes a sense of our being able to look at what we're experiencing in the moment and then saying, okay, I can drop this, or I can let go of this, or I don't have to clench around that feeling of I-ness or my-ness, or me being a particular something. So as we were meditating, I was seeing that, that I was kind of watching that, and I was aware of a couple of things. One thing was my, that there can be an impetus around, like, what am I going to talk about? When you're giving a Dhamma talk, sort of, what am I going to talk about? And then, okay, just put that down. Let go of that. And so that can be quite easy to see, but then what I also see behind that is this sense, as I was talking about when I was guiding the meditation a little bit, of the doer, that sense of like a pusher or something behind what it is that we're noticing. That's like the meditator. And it's not always that we can see that so clearly, because when we are meditating, it's, sometimes thoughts are arising and we're seeing through our experience, but then there can be this subtle pressure of, I have to be doing this, or I better be doing this in a better way, or whatever it might be. Or the doubter, doubting what's actually right. Am I doing this right? There must be some other way. And so we have this sense of like what the meditator is, what we are as a meditator. Even when, for myself, for example, when the mind is quite quiet, there can just be this subtle pressure behind that. And so I think for like when I try to be aware of that, I try to do it on a friendly term, just kind of, okay, how can I, this is okay, like what's wrong with the situation? It's just another experience. It doesn't have to be me identifying with that and then creating it as like, I wish I could get rid of this doer, or I wish I was a better meditator, or whatever it is. Or my meditation will be really together and strong when I no longer have a doer there. And that's just the doer in the background doing its thing. So this is just an encouragement to kind of think about how we have a sense of ourselves within our own experience, and how we can try to be more friendly, welcoming, and try to understand that those things that we do when we're chastising ourselves, or we're frustrated with how we're responding to a particular experience, that is just another habit that we've entered into, and we can loosen that up. And so I think the way to do that is to just try to take it less personally, and try to kind of just more see it like, oh yeah, there I go again, no problem. Yeah, there it is again. That's okay. And then it can kind of quiet down, and that friendliness can actually be felt. We can internalize it. So I think that's enough for now. It's the short reflection. I'm just wondering how everybody else is doing, and how your meditation is going, how your practice is going. It's nice to see everyone's faces. For those who are on the live stream, we're experimenting now for the first time, taking our masks off, going with the guidelines. Seem to be okay, and can feel a bit odd. A strange feeling of freedom and being in jail at the same time. I should be having this mask on, but I like having it off, but there's something wrong here. All right. We shall receive a question from the ether. Okay. I was worried that the people on the live stream couldn't hear the question, but they should be able to see the question, so that resolves that. That's a very interesting observation. Having a family difficulty, and those seem to be the things that press our buttons the most. The people who were closely associated with, and then something happens. So I would say that's exactly right in terms of how some people experience equanimity as numbness. So we can call it more also indifference, and I believe that is the close enemy of equanimity, whereas the far enemy is sort of revenge. I'm just going to stay in my space here and watch this person suffer, but I'm not going to react. So it's sort of, the equanimity of revenge. So that the indifference is more, there is a sense of that, and I think that it's exactly right. Like equanimity has a sense of being present. So we're welcoming the unpleasant experience, and that's what I was talking a little bit about with contentment. So contentment doesn't mean that we're just happy with whatever's going on because it feels right and happy and good. It means that no matter what's happening, then we have a sense of something being okay. But I think with it comes that sense of sort of sober sadness that this is the way the world is, that there is difficulty, there are problems that people have with each other. And when we have that, then equanimity has more of a sense of caring. There's a sense of caring for the suffering that we're seeing. So the Brahmaviharas, so we have metta, which is goodwill, karuna, which is compassion, and mudita, which is a sense of joy for another person's success, and equanimity, they go together. It's not like they're divorced, like you only experience equanimity and then you don't experience any of these other states when we're talking about a worldly sense or how we're interacting with the world. So for me, that's where equanimity really has a sense of really caring and also knowing that we have a similar experience with another human being. We know what it's like to be arguing or to be in strife with somebody else. And so it's not that sense of indifference, like I'm just going to turn myself off, which is that numbness that can occur. And I think all of us are aware of doing that. And I think where that comes from is more of a protection. Like it's, we're putting on like body armor, and we're kind of keeping another person at bay, or another, or the experience at bay. So it's sort of like, I'm just going to separate out what's going on for me right now because it feels too threatening. It's too painful. And so we learn to like shut off our emotions. And that sometimes feels better than reaching out and wanting to strangle someone, or kind of getting really angry and yelling back at the person. But then we have this sense of distance from the person. So I think true equanimity does not have distance. It has a sense of really being careful and concerned about another person or another being or our own experience, whatever it is. And so it's in between that revenge. You're getting your just, desserts, and that sense of feeling like a numbness or indifference. And so there's a closeness that's involved with that other person, and yet we're not emotionally then getting involved in their negativity or their outburst. So the sense of equanimity is like the mind is not necessarily moving into aversion or into a defiled sense, like greed or something. I'm trying to get something here. It's just there's a sense of contentment with it, but we're not at the same time trying to get away from it or emotionally just dropping, what we're feeling. So that's I think a connection we have when we're connected to another person. Then equanimity can have that sense of being very present for them, and that's what you find when people are having difficulties and someone's just present for them. They're there, they're listening, and they're not trying to do anything or make that person better. It's just that quality of being present, and that can be felt for other people. Whereas numbness can have a feeling of well, I'll be here, but I'm not going to be involved in whatever it is that's going on with you. So I think just trying out how to connect with people when there's strife or adversity, or and then equanimity also arises when we see that we're trying to get something out of the situation. Like let's say a child, somebody has a child, and the child has a great success, and we think, oh, that's so wonderful, I'm so happy for you, and then there might be this feeling of like, I don't want you ever to have failure, or I want you to. There's something that we're trying to have in that situation, rather than a sense of just joy for the moment. There's something we're projecting into the future, or wanting them to learn or to see, or yeah, I really wish you'd just believe in yourself more. And there it goes again into that sense of the doer. I have to make sure something's getting done here. Whereas equanimity would just see that arising, that joy that's there, and knowing that it can, that it's arising, we're seeing it present, and then it has that sense of mudita as well, that joy for somebody else, for their success. But then the equanimity comes in without not really wanting anything out of that situation or from that person, or for them to learn something or do something. And the reflection that comes out of like, well, yeah, what's it like when that person comes to me and they say they've completely failed, and they're having a terrible time. And our sense is that, can we just maintain a very clear sense of connection with the person, but we're not moved by them? So the Buddha talks about how a monk should behave with the people, with lay people. And one of the ways that he says to do that is that you don't get a monk who is joyful and happy when the lay people are joyful and happy, and sad and depressed when the lay people are sad and depressed. And so that might kind of be odd. It's like, well, what does that mean? Like, isn't that kind of like then the monk is separating? And it's like, well, no. The monk is actually being a refuge, and monk and nuns, I should also say, is being a refuge for those people, so that he or she is not carried away, by these emotional experiences. So it's not like it's sort of teaching of what a refuge is there. So you think you get like when certain people are depressed, and I would say this is the same for everybody. This isn't just how monastics should behave. I think it's like we want to be careful how much we're actually brought. We're kind of carried away by another person's emotions, and so that we're not actually kind of on the whirlwind. And in a way, then we can be a refuge for that person, because when somebody is really sad and then you get really sad, then you're just kind of moving with their own sense of grief, or their sense of like anger or aversion. I think if I'm going to more talk about it, grief can sometimes be a very wholesome emotion. So I would say more something like anger. When people get angry, then you want to be careful not to get angry with them. So this is something, Shelley, we talk about with, like when you get involved in activism or something, people can be quite angry when they're active, they're involved in their righteous movement and what they think. But then, we have to be really careful, like, how can I maintain my equanimity when that's occurring, so I'm not actually swept up in another person's emotion. I can see that with, with greed or something like that. People are taking food and you see other people are taking food and, I guess it's okay for me to take whatever I want or something like that. I remember when we were at a sort of a monk birthday, there was a celebration for one of the senior monks' birthdays, and so some cheesecake was brought in, and it was really big cheesecake. And then just one after the other, every monk took quite a large slice, and I think it was just sort of a sense of, this doesn't happen very often, and there was a lot of cheesecake. And I just saw that it was almost as if every monk was looking at the monk to the right. Oh, yeah, okay. And it just kind of went on like that. And it was humorous to watch. Not in a critical way, just to see that. And so, like, I don't think there was really anything wrong in that moment, but it also we can see that in situations that are more extreme like that, where people are given into, like you can think about recent events in the last year, rioting, things like that, people breaking windows and destroying things. There can be that sense of just getting wrapped up in others' emotions. So it's important that we figure out how to stabilize our own sense of our own center, and we're not necessarily drawn into the unwholesomeness of how people are experiencing their own emotions.
So do you get to that through wise reflection, or do you get that through the experience of samadhi? Because that's what came up for me in this meditation. Wise reflection is leading me to samadhi, peace. And I thought it was the other way around or something. And so it seems to me the emphasis on the sensation of the body, of peace, that is encouraged in this lineage is really important, because otherwise the connections in the brain are just doing what they do. So it's a question, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, your question, I was just going to say the answer to your question is that's correct. So you said either or, but it's not an either or. So it's, Longta Mahabua, who's one of the most famous monks in Thailand. He recently died a few years ago, and he has a book that's titled Wisdom Develops Samadhi. And so the sense is that, through wise reflection, we can calm our minds. And through calming our minds, we can also have wise reflection. So it's a reciprocal process. And I would say that's sort of obvious, like when you're in a situation where you want to say something that's going to get you into some trouble. You're going to say something to somebody and you shouldn't say it. And then you say to yourself, I really shouldn't say this. But I think I'm going to say it anyway. But then you don't. I really don't think I should say this. This is not going to be for my benefit or the other person's benefit. Without that reflection, you might have easily just come out and said it. So it's like what we're doing a lot of the times is we're leading ourselves, because then that led to more calm, hopefully. Maybe not in the short term. Maybe there was frustration with not wanting to say, with not saying what you wanted to say. But then we see the benefit of that, which is peace and calm. And so a lot of our practice is actually learning how to speak to ourselves. That's what being a friend to ourselves is. It's a sense of like, how do I speak wisely so that I actually listen to what I'm saying and it's the right thing for me to do? Because most of the time, we do know what the right thing is to do. But we have a lot of things we're dealing with internally that are not always, that catch us off guard. And so if we learn to listen to ourselves, we learn to pay attention to that voice that's kind of in the back, that we don't hear too often, the one that's sort of like, excuse me. Like, I don't want to listen to you. We start tuning into that voice, and that's the voice of wisdom, but it can often be stifled because our emotional life or our kind of habits, defilements, the ways that we respond to, anger or greed or whatever it is that catches us off guard and isn't wholesome for us. It's hard to kind of fight back against those or to listen to something else because they're loud. They can be very loud, and that's what's hard is to accentuate that voice within. That's actually the wise voice, the reflective voice. Do you remember the last time you did this? Got you in a lot of trouble. And I can say from my own experience, it can be very difficult to pay attention to that voice because sometimes there can be just overwhelming experiences of desire or anger or fear, anxiety, whatever it might be. And it's really hard to tune into that sense of wisdom that we have within ourselves. Like for me, one of the things that I was reflecting about was I felt pretty upset that it didn't work out for the live stream. Even though I could reflect like, oh, come on, like 10 years ago, there was no live stream, or 5 years ago. I mean, what's there to be upset about? It's like, well, there was all these people there, and, and they were waiting, and there was disappointment. And so I'm kind of trying to use that voice of wisdom, but it's not helping, because I was really, I was kind of angry, I was frustrated. And then I got back in the live stream, or the internet wasn't working back at the monastery. And then that continued, and the service met I can't remember the name of the service right now, but I'd call them, they'd call me back, so, oh yeah, we're sending a serviceman out right away, and then they'd show up, and then they'd say, oh, I can't do this alone, I need somebody else here, and okay, and meanwhile, the Friday's getting closer and closer to the next live stream, and that feeling was coming up again, oh, this cannot be happening again, and this is so ridiculous, and can't they just, and I was like, I'm just going to splice these wires myself. I mean, this is not that difficult. What are you guys doing? And what was interesting was that as soon as that blew over and Friday didn't work out, and it wasn't taking up a huge amount of mental space, but I was very much aware that there was some frustration there. As soon as that blew over and I let go of it, it just was not a big deal anymore. And I just was recollecting that, like, wow, like how amazing it is to get so caught up in an emotional experience, be frustrated, and that it's not so easy to quell all the time, even though I know that, like, I've been through this before. 4 days from now, I'm not going to care. 3 days from now, I'm not going to care, and yet I care because it can be very overwhelming. And so we are learning to talk to ourselves. We are learning to say, like, okay, it's going to be fine, and it could be fine this evening, it could be fine any time, or not. What are you going to do about it if it's not? What if you're going to get really frustrated? It's just going to build and build and build, and then. So that's where equanimity comes in. So, oh, okay, I can just be accepting of this, and then the desire for it to be different than how it is can drop, and that's what we're trying to work with, is that discontent. We have to deal with a lot of unpleasantness in our lives, but then when we realize that we can still be content even though we're experiencing difficulty, that's where sort of the practice is at its edge. Can I still be okay with being frustrated instead of being carried away by it? So we get that through our own reflection sometimes. Just telling ourselves, like, well, it's okay, it's going to be fine. It's always fine, right? Yeah, it's true, it's always fine. It's fine. It's not fine right now. Yeah, I know. So that's the reflection. You can't, when I started, I thought I could just pay attention to my breath for 30 years, and then I'd be enlightened. right? That was the idea. I'll just pay attention to this calming object and everything will be fine. And it just doesn't work that way, because everybody could do that, and it doesn't work. We do want to kind of work. The Buddha has so many ways of teaching, and the reason that he teaches these ways is so we can actually bring those teachings into our experience and say, oh, how is this working? Am I still experiencing dukkha even though I'm focused on my breath, or whatever it might be? So yeah.
Here's another question.
Okay.
Sometimes we don't have a choice between willingness and equanimity, especially if one is facing bullying unknowingly.
Bullying?
Is it not better than to maintain distance and walk away?
The only part I didn't quite understand about that question was bullying unknowingly. So I could understand how that could occur. We might not be aware that we're being bullied. But if you don't know you're being bullied, then I think it'd be hard to walk away, because if you're not sure. But if I understand the question from a sense of just tension or difficulty, or one has a subtle sense of strife within, yeah, we have to figure out an expedient means to deal with a situation. So it's not like you can always get to that place of equanimity where you're not trying to get away from somebody, or you're not feeling revenge. You just might not be able to deal with a particular person. I think many of us have just been in a situation where it's just like, it'd be better for me to walk away, or just to say something like, I can't deal with this right now, I'm sorry. And because if you try and then it turns out really badly, that was the wrong choice. And so each of us has to know, again, through our own wisdom, how much we can actually take with another individual. And then I think the important thing, though, is to skillfully excuse ourselves. So if you're in a situation that's just too difficult with somebody else, you have to I think it's better than saying like, you know what, I can't deal with this right now, and get your hands in their face, and so I'm out of here. It's sort of like, you can kind of say, just be honest, I'm having a hard time dealing with this, or I'm having a hard time. And I think it'd be better if I actually just walked away, or I didn't say anything. So surely we can't always, we have to figure out what the right measure is in each situation. And that's not always staying in a situation that's potentially going to be dangerous or worse for ourselves. In situations where we are able to remain calm when we're around somebody else, one of the things that I think to work with around that is to see like, well, if I'm able to listen and be calm at the same time, that will probably impact the other person. And the other person then will possibly have an understanding that I'm not a threat. And they can see that peace, and that even though it might be very uncomfortable for us, sometimes it's worth it if we don't feel physically threatened to work with our limit, our kind of emotional limit of what we can take in a situation like that. And that just means that then you try to work with that. I mean, like, for example, if you have a child, and your child's screaming at you, hopefully it's your young child screaming, then what do you do? You say, I'm not going to deal with you. I've had enough of you. One of the best things that a child can learn from is just calmness. They're a parent that actually is not taking the experience personally. It's just like, okay. And that, you're just sort of with their temper tantrum, or with their difficulty. I think a lot about some of you may have read, there's a little book, or 4 books by Ajahn that are on the Brahma Viharas. I think it's the one, I can't remember which one it is. It might be on Karuna, where one of the fellows who was at Abhayagiri, he wasn't a monk. He was a body worker. I think he was a masseuse. And he died about a decade ago, I think. But he used to have this sense of just being with another person in a particular way that was just receiving that person. And he had a particular saying as well when he was massaging, and that was the title of the book. Does anybody remember that? It's like, don't force your body, or don't push. Just use the weight of your body. And so that was how he would teach his students who were studying massage. And I think how that relates to me in this other situation that he was in was he was sitting across at a meditation retreat from a woman who was in tears, and she was just crying and crying and crying. And in meditation retreats, you're silent. And so he was sitting across from her in the meal hall, and he just wasn't doing anything, right? Just sitting there, and he was just receiving her tears, just sitting there, and it was just quiet, and she was going through quite an emotional experience, and he didn't make any move to get up or to say anything. He just was present throughout the entire time that she was crying, which it seemed like it was, maybe 10 minutes or something, or 20 minutes. And she remarked later how powerful that was of an experience for her, just to have someone sit with her and to know throughout that entire experience that he wasn't doing anything, he wasn't pushing, he wasn't trying to get her to stop, or saying, that's enough, I think 5 minutes was enough. And how powerful that is, to have that sense of presence with someone. So if we can experiment with that a bit, like just to see, like, what can we take with another individual? What can we take with a child? And I think it's very hard to do, because like as a parent, for example, you want to do something, you want to stop them from being in that state, but sometimes they just need to know that it's okay for them to be going through that. I think many of us also, when we have extreme situations like that, that aren't like with our family members, it can be quite jarring because we might not be used to it at all. It's just sort of, it can feel very threatening. But like I said, as long as you're not feeling physically threatened, there is some room for, some experimentation in there. And then when you can't take it, then you got to go. Well, that's a healthy silence, I think. We could wrap it up for the evening. And very nice to sit in this space. And I think there's a very healthy feeling for me, at least how I'm feeling now, just that there is sort of a change, in what we've been experiencing in the last year plus, that we can come into a space with each other and not necessarily feel too afraid, and that it can be a familiar sort of homecoming. I was thinking a little bit about the history of the fact that this has been going on for almost a decade, and And so it's new to me to come into this space, but for many of you, you remember this, and it's been part of your life. So I have mudita for you, that you're able to kind of come back to a communal sense, being around each other again, and feeling that, that wholesomeness. So good to see you all again. See your faces, very nice.